Welcome back to the Personal Process Podcast. Today, we have Mihalis, the creator of language transfer. And as we're going to find out, he has done some amazing things in his lifetime. And I think one topic we're going to be talking about today is fighting with yourself, fighting with your beliefs, and kind of finding your own truth through trial and error and deep reflection. So, with that said, Mihalis, talk about fighting with yourself. What does this mean to you? Do you mind just giving us a little bit of a background? And
Yeah, I guess I thought that would be an interesting, focus for us, because I think so much of my language transfer journey was just like fighting it out with myself, which is really hard to do. Maybe even like this point of history, where anything you want to look at, anything you want to do, there's a whole bunch of people that have already said everything about it and have established the truth, and I really needed to just kind of like, okay, I know what you're saying, I know what you say, but think things through from scratch in my own way. And that involved a lot of fighting with myself in regards to ideas about teaching and all of that, but also in regards to like how to run a project, how to interpret the world, how to see languages, even the idea of like I like in the Arabic course, for example, I need to talk about how languages and dialects, they don't really exist. There's just dialects, really, and we choose one and we put a crown on it and we call it a language. But even stuff like that, you can see things from a different angle and you go, but hold on, that's true. But then the knowledge that we've just kind of like picked up culturally, indirectly, is that, okay, there's languages and they go around having like dialectal babies, and that's just not, it's not the way it works. So that's just one example, of 1,000 different ways like that you just kind of have to kind of find this confidence to have it out with yourself and know that if you're honest with yourself and strict with yourself, then you can find some truth, if that makes sense. So that was like an ongoing journey throughout my activism career, and also like building language transfer, which I think is like one of the most important things. Also, because I find that fewer and fewer people do it, because fighting with yourself often means arriving to different conclusions than your clique group, and that's very isolating and ostracizing. So the world's in a mess. We're all in a mess. We all have social opinions at the moment. We all have opinions about what's politically correct and incorrect, and I see very little fighting with oneself in that process. So that's why I thought it would be a great focus for us today.
Absolutely. And I think it's a very amazing topic for a show to cover, because it's called the personal process, right? And without fighting with yourself to know what's true in your opinion, without just getting all this input and not being able to sift through to see which speck of that information is your gold, it's really doing a disservice to oneself. And I guess one thing that I wanted to kind of bring it back to, since you were mentioning the activism that led to some of this fighting with yourself to figure out what's true, do you mind just bringing us back through the first piece of activism that really got you thinking about this? Because I know you've done a lot in various countries.
Oh, but it was before activism, I think.
Was it?
Yeah, because I think I grew up around a lot of extremely damaging hypocrisy. Oh, it's always so early that this stuff has to come up, but it's just, it's just, yeah. I mean, like, I if I want to share the language transfer story and my story, I need to share these really personal things about my past, which are really difficult to understand for oneself, let alone like share, But I grew up in a very like a abusive environment and petrifying environment, which made firstly all of my senses kind of get really heightened, because if you're a child and you're in a sense of danger, then you become very sensitive, because you need to judge when somebody just might lose their mind out of nothing, and you might be like fearing for your life. So growing up in that, I understood at some point that it was hereditary, between commas, that this came to my dad from his granddad. And even though, for example, like not from his granddad, from my granddad, who I met once in my life, and that he didn't see his father in himself, which was amazing because I'm pretty sure he was much worse. And so at a really young age, I was like, oh, you're like this because your dad was like this. And then, oh, I'm going to have to be really careful. That was a really, really young. So I think that marked me hugely in my life, but to a fault where I have punished myself and judged myself for the most normal of feelings as well, so I kind of took it a bit to the extreme, but it led to all of this. And now I'm kind of at the other end of the tunnel, which is, all of the support language transfers got, both like in regards to like noise online and now financial support, which allows me to live and project with the project in a dignified way. I'm kind of like at the other end of the tunnel, processing all of this, processing the crazy ways it made me work with language transfer, the pressure that receiving donations had on me, a sense of self-value, all of this very messy situation. Like I think any psychologist can be like, go through my video updates and just go, oh, poor sod, because he never got any help.
So, couple interesting points, and again, to reiterate, I don't think I actually mentioned this. So, language transfer is a free program that Mihalis does completely based off of donations. And honestly, what you've achieved is just remarkable with this. So, again, huge props for you, sir. But kind of just talking specifically about that initial childhood upbringing and your realization with this. A lot of people have, well, not a lot of people, but there's a decent chunk of individuals who have experienced trauma as a child, various forms from various facets. But for you to realize this at such a young age, I guess, is there any advice you would have for individuals to break free from just hearing negativity and just being able to fight with yourself to unlock the truth?
It's so hard, and I don't know how strange I am. Like I'm reading a lot about trauma lately, for example. Now, I almost started to believe that, and I'm still not sure, like it might, like that I'm on the autism spectrum because my mother, who's a psychologist, told me so, but that is very convenient for her. So, it's really hard to, so I think about, is that the case? Because I never have any memory of like loving my father, for example. I never have, I feel like maybe, for example, if I'm on the autism spectrum and that's a biological thing that has nothing to do with my upbringing, then maybe it was easier for me to disconnect from these like circles of contention. I'm not sure if that's a word you only use in Spanish, like contención, like containment, which is the hardest thing to do. Like, that's why I was like shaking my head when you were asking me. It's like, how do you do that when your sense of self, when your sense of love is that circle? I just finished a book called Betrayal Bonds, I think. And it just helped me understand so much why people stay in abusive relationships. It literally breaks the brain. Like it literally breaks the brain. It's incredible what happens to your brain. And so much of the stuff I go through and went through with language transfer and the abusive relationships I repeated with the usership, which was mostly my fault. And like when I made the video and I was just like, I'm sick of this. I made a video a few years ago. Like I can't pay the rent. I don't have health insurance. I'm working 9 to 10, 7 days a week. And, it was me participating in what was essentially an abusive relationship until I just got to my limit where it made me sick and said, no, no more. And then the usership was like, no, actually, we're not very abusive. So, it really does a lot of fascinating things to the brain. Anybody that has gone through this in their life, I really, really, really advise reading about just like biologically what the brain does on trauma, to help those people in their lives. So it's a really hard thing to give advice about because I'm not sure if I actually have an advantage. Like if I'm on the autism spectrum, I really had the advantage of being able to see myself very different from the tribe. And I also had like a sick feeling here since I was a child about belonging to any kind of tribe. Like it felt
Hmm.
dirty, even not dirty, like embarrassing, shameful to identify as anything, as a member of my family, as a Cypriot, as anything.
Really?
So that might be my own head. That might be a part of the trauma that I lived. I'm not sure, but what can I say? I think the best advice I can give is this kind of reading, which is very biological, psychological stroke biological, uh, where people can look at themselves objectively. That allows you to look at yourself objectively and notice the habits in your relationships and go, oh, I'm an absolute textbook case. There's nothing very special going on here.
It's very true, and you're mentioning the habits going into relationships that emulate the ones that we're like born in, and how it damages our brain. And I think all of this is linked. And I think a lot of people don't even realize this. Like, and they just happen on autopilot, and then they're like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And I think through the process of really fighting with yourself, through the process of reflection, through the process of getting to know yourself better, it's really the only way that someone can defeat this. Because anyone can say that you have some issues, and sometimes it's just random trolls on the internet. I'm sure you've had your fair share, being the online presence that you are. But having this ability to go through and really decipher who you are and what's happened in your world is a critical element. Now,
I think I actually, sorry to interrupt. I think I do have a really good piece of advice, actually, now that
awesome.
you've said that, which is judge yourself in the same way you're judging everybody else. I'm sick of everybody that always knows when it's wrong when someone else does something, and they speak to their friends and they expect all the friends to nod and smile and say, yeah, they're 100% right. And then when that person in the other situation, then everything is churned, which is why I have really few friends, because for me, being a friend is saying like, I think you're wrong, like, otherwise, what is the point? And so yeah, I think a lot of us with subjectivity is an issue. No, subjectivity is very important to survive, especially if you've been through like abuse and trauma. Your subjectivity really grows, your ego grows. You can even most people that have gone through trauma have certain narcissistic traits. So all of that is a defense mechanism that you need to believe everybody needs to believe they're a good person, unless they're an absolute psychopath, which is a real minority. People need to believe they're a good person. So they will make a construct around that, and they will just repeat more in the world of what they live. Now, I don't want to be like the people that I hate or hated. I don't want to do that. So that's why I fought with myself so much. So I judge myself with the same eyes that I judge somebody else, which has done two things. It's improved me as a person and also made me more tolerant, only slightly, towards other people.
Mihalis, wow. Like, I'm not sure if you guys saw me. I'm literally rocking on my chair, like nodding my head. That was just
I'm
so
glad
good.
we're repeating the interview there.
That was so good. And I want to kind of go back to what you said. I don't want to kind of be that person. I don't want to do that impact to other people, the negative impact. And just being so self-conscious of like the damage that it's done to you, and realizing that no, I don't want to be part of this cycle. I don't want to continue this. It's like, man, like, let me just give some claps, man. Like, it no, it's a huge point though. And it's like, it's in any facet. It's like, you're even mentioning with your friends, like, you got to tell them how it is. If there's something negative, you want to tell them, but it's because you want them to, because it's not only interacting with you, right? It's their whole network. And that
Yeah, and it
network,
helps with their relationships. Like I've got a good friend that only calls me when she's having problems with her husband, and I'm like, yeah, like, I totally get you, but yes, he's a man, but he has feelings, and we go through it, and then she's like, oh, thank you, okay, I know what I need to do now. But most people think that being a friend is just going, you're 100% right. What an asshole. And no, that's not being a friend. That's very cheap friendship. And if that's what you provide, and if that's what you're looking for, then you're not going to be the change you want to see in the world. Sorry. No matter how many memes you post,
It's so true. It's so true, and it's such an important point that could be extrapolated in so many ways. Um, Unfortunately, there's a lot more depth that I want to cover from this, and we'd be here all day if we went through that route. Um, yeah, so I just wanted to change gears a little bit from that awesome segue to the activism realm, because you mentioned that you went back to academia and even law school, and you went to law school, and we're talking off air about this, but you went to law school just to prove that you could do it. You did it. And, from a position of law, it has a lot of, prestige, a lot of comfort, obviously financial security. But you went off and said, nah, not for me. I'm out. And I'm smart enough to do this. Well, tell me about it.
Yeah, that wasn't quite the story. It was more
Okay.
like I didn't know what I wanted to do at university. University was
Mm.
just the way we moved out of home. So
Yeah.
that was what that was about.
Right.
And I come from just like a huge ignorance, I was really, I'm from the outskirts of London, which is, like I said last time, that the bastards of the empire. We're all just like children of very rural people, like shoved together in this neighborhood. Like we don't really get a lot of like cultural exposure to anything. So
Right.
the exposure that I had about what being a lawyer might mean was Ali McBeal series. Are you too young for that? That
I'm
series?
I'm not sure if I'm too young, but I definitely do not know. So do you mind explaining a little bit about that?
No, it's just a really silly, fun series. It's like Friends, but lawyers, basically.
Okay.
And it is, if you see it or you watch a trailer, you just know how silly it is. What I'm saying.
Right.
But that I didn't know anything about the world. So so I was getting good grades, which was unexpected when I left school and went to college for the 2 years of A levels in the UK. And so law asked for high grades, and I guess I definitely had much more pronounced narcissism at that age of just wanting to be the best at everything, and that was part of like feeling worthy of something with the upbringing that I had. So it was like, I'm going to get my law degree by the time I'm 21, and I'm going to be 23 when I'm finished the bar, and blah, blah, blah. I didn't know what any of that meant. So I did a year of law, and I passed. I think that was the detail that, I did the exams to say, I'm not leaving this because it's hard. I'm leaving this because it's boring as shit, and I'm not learning anything about the world. And I've always had this sensation that I'm born into a very strange world. Just didn't understand how people could take things for granted, like cars and light bulbs. And I wanted to learn about the world, not what some old like white men write about it. Although I find it much more interesting now that I know about the world. Like law is much more interesting, but not to an 18-year-old that hadn't seen anything. So then I changed to languages, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it or where I was going to go. It was just one of these things that just felt right, and it felt like magic. It was like, oh, next year I'm starting Hogwarts. Yeah, it was like next year I'm starting Hogwarts. This is what it felt like going from law to languages.
That's incredible, Mihalis. Like I feel like if I was in your position, I would just feel so scared. And you're saying it felt like magic. So I guess, how did this magic transform you? Like, what did you do with it?
So I had like quite crippling anxiety at university. I didn't know what anxiety was. Everything now is mental health, but it wasn't
Back
when
then.
I was that age. I didn't even know what it was. I just had these horrific feelings like the ground was going to swallow me up. And I guess I just needed always something to be very excited about to kind of like mull over those feelings. The languages really helped. And then as soon as I started actually learning, then I started to construct a new person in a new language which wasn't an invention, it was me, but just like a reconstruction where so many of your habits about the way you think are tied in with language, when you internally dialogue with yourself. Oh, really hope I didn't get COVID last night. Like the way you dialogue with yourself, the thoughts you have, etc. So living in Spanish was like a rebirth. That was hugely therapeutic. And I just wanted to, like, we had a year abroad as part of the degree, and I was emigrating. Like, my year abroad was about finding where I was going to live. Everyone was doing a year abroad. They were going to come back to UK to live and whatever. And my mind was just in a completely different place to anyone else. It was like, I need to find where I'm going to live in this year, and in no time at all, I was just like a native speaker in Spanish, first in Cuba, and I had such a perfect Cuban accent that I would leave from Havana and people would like make comments to me in the street, like, people from Havana are shit, because they would hear me speak and think I was from Havana. And then, I came to Argentina and my accent changed, and I can't even imitate the Cuban accent now. So it's a really emotional thing. It's a totally emotional thing. I've been doing a lot of research about dissociative identity disorder, or in other words, multiple personality disorder, which is a hugely common thing, because when you have huge trauma and terror before your identity is integrated, it kind of breaks. It's a lot to explain. But people that have personality switches, where the personalities take over the body, that's when that goes really wrong. The division of identity, where a part of your identity breaks off and remembers trauma that the rest of your identity won't remember, is an extremely common reaction to trauma, especially when violence comes from the people that's supposed to care for you. So I suspect I have quite an ability to kind of separate compartments of my mind and make new people, which I never really understood until I've been doing this research. And I'd love to talk to psychiatrists that understand more about this, but I'm much more in my own research phase at the moment, because I understand that 5 psychiatrists have 5 different opinions. Basically, it just allowed me to kind of rebuild versions of me, let's say, which would allow me to realize how broken the last versions were. I wasn't aware of any of this,
So tell me, like, where did this happiness come from? Was it just the ability, because you were mentioning earlier that when you kind of thought in Spanish,
someone else.
Sorry?
To be someone else.
To be someone else.
I never feel like it's someone else. I feel like it's me. I never feel like I'm pretending. But when you grow up like with so much neglect and so much violence and psychological violence, really, really, it just does so much to your mind.
Yeah.
Like, I hated the image of the victim. So for me, when we left, it was like, that didn't happen, that doesn't exist. And I was just the bounciest, happiest kid. And everyone was like, oh my God, that guy's going to break. That's what they were saying, like, in my family, like, this guy's older, he's going to fall apart. Because I wasn't processing anything then, but mostly it was because I refused to identify with victimhood or weakness or anything like that. Right. And I guess I needed to, like, Spanish just gave me this ability to everything about me that was positive and that was held back by this anxiety and that was trampled on and whatever, it just could come out by itself.
Yeah. And I want to kind of talk about, bring it back to the fighting with yourself, because this was a critical piece that we talked about here. But this was also around the time where you joined the NGOs and you kind of decided that it might not be the best fit, correct?
Yeah. So I think this is a really good example. So, when I was, you're growing up and you're trying to find your group and what have you. And I kind of identified mine as all these people talking about NGOs, these like socially concerned people, or people that pretended to be socially concerned at university, and now probably all work in banks or whatever. So for me, it was like, what can I do that make me feel good about myself subconsciously? and NGO was like the thing. So I come back to Argentina, like, so I have my year abroad. I go back to England, like 9 months, finish the degree, come straight back to Argentina before graduation. Didn't hang around for graduation or anything. And I start working at this NGO. Now I'm a coordinator of a project in a very well-known NGO in Argentina, and I'm 23. So this is a big ego boost. And then I'm a coordinator of 2 projects in this NGO. Apart from the founder of the NGO, I am like the one that has most work after her. And with all the enthusiasm in the world, I was doing it. And then I looked at the work and I was just like, hold on, this is bullshit. Like, they're just getting loads of money from like American Express and whoever to have the logos on their website. They make these brilliant leaflets about everything they're doing in the villages and whatever. And then you go there and there's just nothing. Like, and they've actually made this NGO with all the best intentions in the world, but they've got trapped in this funding cycle and having to produce material to get the next bit from the funding cycle and not lay off staff and all of this. They're just completely detached from reality, and they're wasting money, which could go to something else. So I started to see that, and of course it was hugely inconvenient for me to see that, because I was a coordinator of 2 projects and I felt like the biggest star in the world, and like I said, like, anyone that goes through trauma has a lot of like kind of narcissistic characteristics. I was very much looking at myself from the eyes of those that have always judged me and wanting to be worthy, so
For
in
sure.
that situation, I sincerely believe that most people just lie to themselves and get on with it and create the alternative reality and get on with it. But because I'd given myself such a hard training not to do that, because I've seen how damaging it is in my parents, I had to fight with myself and say, no, this is not the one. So I quit.
Wow. How did you feel when you quit?
Good for about a day, and then I got swine flu, and it nearly killed me. Literally,
Man,
I was doing that job, a volunteer job in a children's home, English classes at a school, private English classes, and music study. I was absolutely just exhausted, and the moment I could just calm down, I got very sick, which often happens. No, when you're running on adrenaline.
definitely, especially when you just do so much amazing things and you can't rest because you got so much to put out there. And yeah, Matt, there's just so much interesting things about your life and what you've done, Mihalis. I mean, like you mentioned, like a lot of people that were in those top positions, they just lied to themselves. They just lied to themselves, be like, oh, we're doing this good at least, or we're doing that good at least. Even though I think you were kind of alluding to this, if not saying it directly, they know deep down that it's not the right thing. It's not the way forward that's best with the money. But you still took that back. And even though you had a great position and at that time you thought that was the right thing to do, you went away from it and you went to, I mean, like, how do you drop all that comfort? How do you drop all that security and just say, no?
I mean, the comfort's here, isn't it? Like, so I'm not going to be comfortable, knowing that being a sham. Oh, it's horrible. What a horrible feeling when you know deep down that it's just more bullshit. Do you know what I mean? It's horrible. So I don't know. For me, there's not much option there. It's very visceral for me. It's very, very visceral. And
For
I guess
sure.
I always thought most people were like that, but now I understand that most people have these mechanisms of, okay, so society needs us to be okay with contradictions to survive. If we were not okay innately with contradictions, society would crumble because everything is a contradiction. Like you just accept it, in the same way that you accept. Well, I don't want to offend anybody, but also it's a real it's a conscious effort, really, isn't it, to not want to become victim of this just easy ability to create a contradiction, to create a reality that you're comfortable with, so yeah, I think my personal life story just made me acutely aware of that BS that so many people, the great majority of people that grow up, even just in repressive societies, even if they haven't had like a lot of, like a personal abuse or whatever, even if it's just a very repressive politically or religiously, the society, your mind becomes much more like focused on creating this construct that makes you feel comfortable about yourself. You need to feel comfortable about yourself to participate in society. Society is your survival, right? So your mind is needing you to fit into that. And I don't have that, which is what makes me go, oh God, maybe I am on the autism spectrum. I think I always did have it, to be honest. Well, I'm not sure. Sometimes I think I did, sometimes I think I didn't. Sometimes I think I lost it as part of my life experience. Sometimes I think, oh no, I was kind of always like this, But you need to have the courage to be alone, to be lonely, to think differently to people that you love.
To be
It's
ostracized.
yeah, to be ostracized.
Definitely. And I just wanted to bring it back to what you said in the beginning, like when individuals are comfortable on the exterior at the cost of the interior, that's an unfair trade to yourself, And I heard this quote, I don't remember from who, but I believe it was from a famous psychologist. I'm not going to throw out any names because it's a complete guess. But essentially, when we lie to ourselves, or when we essentially do this very thing where we give the exterior power at the cost of the interior, a lot of mental health problems arise, and that's where some of the anxiety can come from for individuals in these positions. And, I think in a lot of Hollywood movies, like you see these people in positions of power in like the finance industry or industries that aren't, the greatest givers, and there are more takers. They do drugs to maybe cope with this kind of thing. And I think it's a critical point that you hit on the head with that one, Mihalis. So yeah, I mean
addictions are the essential response to trauma, which is another fascinating thing. So I've always been like really conscious of this stuff, and it doesn't mean that I'm not full of addictions, like just even the way I was working and the tension and release that I was building up in those cycles became addictive to my brain, and I had no idea until I just read this book all about it, so I think that to one degree or the other, the majority of people are traumatized because the way we organize life in society is unnatural and too stressful for the human being. Even having children were not meant to be brought up by their parents. Children were meant to be brought up by a group of parents in the village. This is how we evolved. It is a horrifically stressful thing to be stuck with children all day. It's traumatic for the parents, it's traumatic for the children, it's just one example of the way we organize our society, which is just kind of, it doesn't fit with how we're built. And in response to that, you get all different, kinds of addictions, which are then monetized, be it social media, be it substances, be it food, the world runs on addictions. It's fascinating, and trauma is the motor behind that. So yeah, people like me might have a special case, but everybody is going through this to one degree or the other. So it's easy to listen to somebody like me and go, oh, post-hard, what a hard life. And it's just like, yeah, but still, look at yourself, because we're not living in a fairyland, and the world that we're living in would have damaged you in so many ways. And why do we look at that? To victimize ourselves and feel sorry for ourselves, and and to exoticize that or whatever? No, we realize that so that we do not continue it on. I read a quote in this book, again, like you, I don't know who said it, but it was like, childhood is a nightmare, a social nightmare, something like that we are only recently waking up from. What an amazing quote. Because childhood is done so terribly traumatically, and it's only now we're just waking up and going, oh, kids have feelings, that count. That's not discipline, it's something else,
Sure. And it's just unnatural. Tribes don't exist anymore. Everyone's just on their phones for social media. And like relating that back to the point that you were mentioning earlier, social media, I honestly think, is very similar to a drug addiction. And it's the only difference is people don't recognize that. They don't recognize. I'm not sure if you've used your screen time before, Mihalis, but like I have some periods where I'm stressed and I look, it's like 6 hours a week on Instagram or Facebook, and sometimes even more. But it's like it's a socially accepted coping mechanism. And I'm not sure if this is kind of the reason that so many individuals, governments, and companies are going towards this medium, because they know that maybe that society is not right for individuals right now. So they need some way to escape from the
Since a
stresses.
long time. I mean, I think generally addictions are just one of the best things you can monetize. No, I mean, and that's another problem that I always come back to. Principal problem in society is what happens or what doesn't happen is what moves money. So if it moves money, it happens. If it doesn't make money move, it doesn't happen, So if you think addictions make money move, whoa, everything is gearing for us to be more addictive and more addicted. So I really see us as humans as a kind of species held captive by the system that they've created. And we're all like looking at each other, and it's like, no, it's just us, really.
Absolutely. You really hit you really just secured the safe on that one. That's a saying I'm going to say from now on. I don't know if it sounds weird. Let me know.
The safe.
Secured the safe. You put the gold in there, you locked it up, and we're keeping that one. But yeah, it really is like that, and just looking at the basic dynamics, like no one really has family dinners even anymore, everyone just does their own thing. No one communicates. And I guess the sacrifices we've given to live in this city world and all that kind of stuff, it's like, it's too much,
The engine behind our system is not our well-being. So that's what I keep saying all the time to people when I'm chatting about politics in the dog park, that I don't agree with democracy, bombshell, but I agree 100% with democratic values. So at the moment we have democracy, but we don't have democratic values. So choosing who's going to abuse you for the next 4 years, there's nothing democratic about that. Democracy is like, okay, all of the resources of the state has to be geared at my well-being, my dignity, my integrity. Those are democratic values. Now, democratic values are constitutional, right? It's an unwritten, or in some cases written, constitution in which everything else is based around. So we shouldn't even be allowed to vote for somebody that offers us less democracy, which happens all the time. That should be an absolute impossibility. So we vote as a way to not experience democracy in the majority of cases, and democracy being understood as a set of democratic values.
Definitely.
And in that, we're all traumatized, which is what I find fascinating. Within that, we're all traumatized and have these very traumatic relationships with individuals in power, or positions of power, or concepts of power, and seeing the way people interact with the pandemic, I think this is part of a process, and there are many processes in the world that do this either deliberately or by accident, that create governable mentalities. And this is, and the pandemic is incredible for creating governable mentalities. It's quite scary, the footprint that's going to be left behind from this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's
speaking of addictions.
For sure, Mihalis. And it's I don't even know if I can comment on that. You just explained that so well. But I want to kind of continue this fighting with yourself journey. I want to take us to Cyprus, and I'm not sure on the timeline if this was before Argentina, if this was after Argentina, but you've done a lot after. Okay, awesome. So we're on the right track then. And, you've done a lot of activism in that region, and especially in the buffer zone. And I've done a little bit of research after talking with you a little bit about this, but it's really incredible what happened. And feel free to correct me since you were on the front lines over there. But essentially, Cyprus is an island that has a Turkish group and a Greek group, and the UN essentially got involved. A lot of I don't know if it was war, yeah, and it just really ruined the two groups of people because I think inherently everyone kind of still wanted to be with each other, but the UN was kind of stopping that from happening.
Oh, it's very complicated, the situation in Cyprus. I mean, Cyprus got its independence in 1960 only. And
Right,
before that, it was a colony forever.
right,
France, England, Egypt, Turkey, whatever, right? Or Ottoman Empire, no?
right.
Um, and Cyprus has always been like a mix of communities. You have Greek-speaking Cypriots, although that's a Cypriot dialect, which is very different. And Turkish-speaking Cypriots, again, that's a Cypriot dialect. Armenian Cypriots, Maronite Cypriots, which came from what is Lebanon like 1,000 years ago. So we were
Wow.
always those communities, or that was a mix of communities. Now, in 1960, and the English wrote the Constitution of Cyprus, they obliged all of the secondary minorities to choose whether they were Greek or Turkish. They had to
Mm.
choose if they were going to be Greek or Turkish. This created a situation of bicommunality with a little bit of meddling, as we know, divide and conquer. Uh, Managed to have these communities fight against each other, which means that independent Cyprus could still be managed to a certain degree by foreign powers and be used as a launch pad in the Middle East. So I think it's like 3% of Cyprus is sovereign English, a British military base still. There's another
Wow.
3%, which is the buffer zone that divides the island. There's espionage bases, US espionage bases in the mountains. So it was kind of constructed, but the conflict and the violence did happen, of course. But it was. I mean, it's a very, very complicated story, and there's all different kind of opinions on it. But yeah, I went there and did this activism with Greek and Turkish, and again, I had to fight with myself because I thought I was being open-minded. Because of course, like you grow up with this victimization that these like barbarian Turks came and like raped your grandparents and la 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 la. But you hear the same stories from both sides,
Absolutely.
and so I thought I was being open-minded, saying, well, the ones that were born here, it's not their fault, right? So
Mm.
that's a pretty limited position, you know. And then, so I had to fight with myself in Cyprus as well to understand real equality, not feeling like you're the big guy because
Mm.
you let the others be in your Greek island, which is what you've been taught.
Right.
That is the problem, actually,
For
you
sure.
know? So my mind is full of crap because I grew up where everyone else grew up, So it's a constant journey in life of going, oh, where'd that idea come from? you know? So yeah, Cyprus was a big deal for that. And also in regards to ethnically speaking, because I mean, I think this is another amazing point about fighting with yourself. What I've just told you about the history of Cyprus is the truth, but it's not the mainstream history. So if you speak like this, it's like you're almost like some kind of strange exoticist or something. Like, so me in Cyprus, I'm like, look, we're Middle Easterns. Our language is a mix of all of these languages on the island. Like, this is our identity. We are a mix of everything we have here. We are not Greeks, you know. And that's a crazy posture nowadays in Cyprus, although more and more people are coming out and saying, no, this is how we feel, this is how I identify, these are the stories I heard from my grandparents. And Occupy Buffer Zone was a huge movement for that to start happening. And there's still activities in Cyprus from people that met each other in Occupy Buffer Zone that are still doing, like protests and stuff like that.
For sure. And
So yeah,
Mihalis,
like
just before you go on, do you mind just explaining a little bit about what Occupy Buffer Zone is for those that don't know?
we just the buffer zone is like where you can cross over to the other side. That's been open for around 15 years or so, um, or maybe longer now. We went there, and from the north side and the south side, to show that we can live together, that we can cook together, that we can laugh together, that we can resist together
Hmm.
and say that we want to live together. So we occupied the buffer zone. We were there for some months, and we caused a big problem. Like, international media were all over it. Nothing like that had happened in Cyprus. We had like a hour interview maybe on Al Jazeera. It was absolutely crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And even like being from the diaspora, being born in London, like the majority of Cypriots, and going there after having this other identity in Argentina, in Cyprus under Argentine, and being able to find my own spin on things, and say, no, but this is the history, and it's obvious if you look at the language, if you talk to the old people, you know, and this is my identity. Again, you know, like I had to fight with myself to allow myself to see that truth, which is so extravagant compared to the official story, you know, which is crazy. The official story is just, you know, that we are like stranded Greeks from
Mm,
like thousands of years ago, like, you know, pure blood Hellenics. And, you know, and then when people from Cyprus go to study in Greece and they realize the culture is nothing like Cyprus, they come back and they say, they lost the way, we're the original Greeks, rather than
right.
going, oh, maybe I need a different identity. You know, it's incredibly interesting. And something that I always remember is just like, you know, people having a go at me, telling me like, your blood is Greek, you got to stop all of this stupid Turk hugging, you know, and I'd be like,
Mm,
you've literally used 4 Turkish words to tell me that. My blood is like our language, you know, and I had a DNA test to prove it as well.
right. Right. Yeah. And it's I think this kind of shows us, you know, you need to fight with yourself. If this isn't a clear example of why you need to fight with yourself, I mean, you've just clearly shown that people don't even understand this for themselves. You know, there's just propaganda left, right, and center, and everyone wants to believe that they're the best. You know, I think that's kind of nationalism for any country, any people. They want to think that they're the best, whether it's Greek, whether it's Turkish, and they want to feel like they're right because that makes them feel good. But without fighting with yourself to know what's really the case, I mean, you just explained the history of Cyprus to me. I didn't know that. And, you know, I think without this understanding, people really can't go forward. And then one minor point, just to add on, just to add a little bit of understanding for those that don't know. Occupy Buffer Zone was occupied by UN guards, and Mihalis actually has a lot of videos documenting his journey and his activism in this region. And I was watching some of them, and you know, there's guards, there's
They're
Mihalis
funny,
is just
huh?
like, sorry.
They're funny, huh?
They are funny, but like honestly, you're pretty courageous there, Maulus. Like, you know, like there'd be guards like pushing you away, and Maulus would just like try to give him like a big old hug. It's like, we love you. And the interesting point, one particular video, I don't remember which one because I watched it a while back, but Mihalis was speaking and the guards had so much attention to him. And it's not like he was speaking on like, you guys are the worst, but he was just speaking like, we're a community. What are you guys doing here? You're like, you're just breaking us
Some of
apart.
some of those guards came and thanked me. And they said to me from the inside, we realize how much BS this is. And we're all following you. But then the chief of staff of the UN came and tried to like manipulate me psychologically and threaten me.
Really?
Well, he was very bad at it, bless him. You know, he was like, oh, I know what you are. Yeah, he was really cocky, you know, like, I know what you are. You're just a spoiled Cypriot, which has, you know, been given everything, which is pretty much the case in Cyprus nowadays.
Hmm.
Um, and just completely got everything wrong about me and my motivations and why I was doing it, you know. And I just remember leaning in at one point and going, all right, you're going to have to help me here. I really can't work out if you think I'm really stupid or if you're really stupid. Just like the chief of staff in the UN of Cyprus. And I went home and I just wrote this out, what happened. And then it got picked up by all these newspapers and what have you. But yeah, like I didn't have any fear, but I think that's probably got to do with an exaggerated adrenaline reaction that goes back to what I was discussing before. And, you know, I've kind of taught myself to be a bit more cautious. But yeah.
But I
Sorry, I
mean, like,
just a lot of memories about those times, you know, because you move around, you live so much, and they just feel like other lives. And then it comes up in conversations. It's like, whew,
yeah, that happened.
all that happened. Yeah, all that happened.
Yeah, and you know, it's like, how did you go? Like, just the things that you've done, man. Like, I just don't understand, like, how you had that courage, how you had that confidence, how you had that vigor. Like, I can't imagine going for a hug for a UN guard when they're literally trying to push you away. And these guards had like weapons.
It's
These guards,
intuition as well. You know, there was one of them that if I'd hug, he would have snapped my neck. You know, But
Right.
you can also tell like when they're just like, this is so ridiculous that we're coming here to bother you, you know. So this
Yeah.
guy's like the one we're talking about. It was not actually the occupation; it was the 2-year anniversary after it ended that we made the little event there where we pretended to
Right.
be politicians and
Yeah.
make negotiations. Now, I didn't really have anything to do with that event. I was in Cyprus, I think, briefly at that time, and I went. And things started to fall apart because the UN was like kind of really aggressive really quickly. And then I you know, it just pops up this like save the day character. I don't know who he is. And yeah, and I kind of like took the reins of the situation, which people thank me for because it did make a really good. It did take, you know, like that kind of monologue that I gave outside the UN, which I didn't know was being filmed. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been good. You know, that kind of went viral, and you know, these things wake up inside of people things that they haven't let come out because they haven't fought with themselves. So a lot of people was like, you know what, I think like you, and they were angry about it. Why were they angry? Because they were repressing it themselves for so long, and they needed to see me, you know, and then be like, yes, I feel like that. This is fucking stupid, you know. And also the thing about identity, you know, and people would write to me going like, I've known this always, that we are symbiotic, that we don't exist without one another, you know. So yeah, that was intense.
In the beginning of the Occupy buffer zone, you're leaning a little bit more left, but then as time progressed, potentially that changed. Is that right?
I don't identify with the left. That's what changed. The left as a organization, as a culture more than anything.
Right.
I don't identify because there's not this fighting with yourself going on, as far as I can see. So yeah, like, you know, we're very good at pointing out what's wrong in the world, but we're not very good at not doing that in an abusive way, you know, or using the position of victim to victimize, which is something that is happening loads and loads and loads in loads of spheres, all stuff that we need to work out. But at the same time, I appreciate that this is part of the process. And one of the first processes is anger. You know, one of the first processes, and this was not right, you know. And sometimes you go through these cycles, like, because, you know, I think one of the last processes in these cycles is realizing that your abusers were abused and like finding a peace. You know, we are all agent and we are all victim, and we cannot look at the victimization without looking at the agency. You know, that we can't look at the being victimized without looking at the agency that we have to victimize others. You know.
Wow.
So I think we're in comparing to like a couple of years ago. You know, like I feel like we're probably light years ahead as a culture in doing that. It's messy and ugly at the moment. You know, it's controlled too much by social media and what have you. You know, there are huge problems, but interesting stuff is happening. Whether it's fast enough, time will tell.
For sure. Yeah. Crazy times, crazy times. But no, I definitely hear you. And feeling that full circle effect on how everything is experienced is critical. Yeah, you just have such an deep understanding on this that I think a lot of people really need to hear. And it's like, you know, like a lot of people may only know you from language transfer after learning a language, but like to hear the amount of realization, the amount of experiences and how everything came together is just a different story. You know, you're mentioning earlier that a couple individuals came up to you as like, yeah, I thought that way too, and they repressed it. And you know, it's like we're talking earlier, even that everything's a network effect. You know, like if you decided to stay in law school and go that way, none of this would have happened. And who knows what impact you had on those individuals and what impact they have on others. And all of this spreads forward. And, you know, if anything, this is another reason why you need to fight with yourself. Find your truth and express it, you know, courageously. Because if everyone did...
And sorry, and be comfortable to change it. That's the important thing. When you're fighting with yourself, it's not other people fighting with you that you have to defend yourself against. So you can go, yeah, I said that a year ago. Now I think something different because I learned something else. problem. People break down. It's incredible. And that goes to show how much it has to do with identity. And this is what annoys me and which I've come to have little tolerance for, although I'm working on it, is that when somebody's political opinions are much more about their identity than really caring about society, which in the great majority of cases it is, especially when we all have some level of trauma that has damaged our identity and we want to feel good about ourselves. But when you're in that paradigm, you're doing something selfish, counterproductive, and not altruist as you are proposing it is, So my thinking is it might be this, it might be that. What's your thinking? Oh, but God knows. And have more that attitude with each other. No? Rather than, this is my story has got to survive. For my story to survive, your story's got to die. Because that's just about your identity. And nobody cares about your identity as much as you do.
Absolutely.
Well, these are all fights I've had with myself, and just because I have so much have so much channeling through myself that I don't like, which of course, how is it not going to be the case with the way my mind was formed and in the way that I grew up, partly like in my family, which has a long line of trauma, and partly in this capitalist or whatever word you want to use to describe it, this whole cultural system. Anyway.
Yeah, no, huge points.
I think that was half a sentence again. I'm sorry. I have too many ideas happening at once.
No,
but, we've done this before.
No, I love this, man. I love this, and you just bring up a lot of good points. I mean, we're talking about various aspects of life. I think versus I believe. It's like this is a temporary thought based on every information that I've accumulated and the experiences I've gone through, and having these discussions with people allows you guys to rebuttal and find a clearer truth. It allows you to fight with yourself while conversing with others. And I mean, it's so vital. And a lot of people have, I think you were mentioning this before, but you're like, oh, I'm right. My opinion has to survive. I have to give this opinion. If you disagree with me, it's the worst thing. But then that locks them into that paradigm. It doesn't give them an opportunity to break free out of their own jail to see what the other side looks like. And I think go ahead.
So Game of Thrones helped. So, waiting between the seasons and whatever, I had a friend in the next village who we would meet up with on Sundays and eat. He's the one that sends out the language transfer packs at the moment, by the way. And
right on.
We would just go through all of our Game of Thrones theories. And because it was such a crazy thing where anything could happen, our theories were just endless. And I say it seriously, like as a thought exercise. And to go, you don't know where it's going to go because there is going to be a truth. There's going to be episodes that come out. And you're keeping all these compartments open of what might happen to see also then what might happen afterwards. Well, your interpretation of reality is the same thing. What is, what might be, to understand what is. It's a hard thing to do and it's damaging to the identity. So this is the conflict that we have, because your identity or these beliefs. So the way I think I've got around that is I've identified more and more with what I call, and I really need a better term, the third eye, right? It sounds way too hippie, but it's not where I'm coming from. So for me, like the third eye is the conscious eye that's looking at you like a little animal and deciding what parts of that animal it wants to let filter through and which parts it doesn't, So I might see myself about to react in a way that I don't want to react. I know where it comes from, and the third eye says, no, do it this way. So I think the more you identify with the third eye, with that rationality or consciousness or whatever, the less important the belief system is in your sense of self. And then you can start to control it more than it controls you. We understand more about truth when we consider all of the possibilities, when we don't have the resources to know. And again, language helps us understand this idea. So Greek aletheia, which would be alithia in Cypriot. I love this word. So that means truth, and it is something like unobliteratable, unoblivion.
Wow.
The truth is impossible to put into oblivion. because
Wow.
everything that we are is a result of it. You
Wow.
know, so I think our relationship with truth, which is so egotistical because it's, you know, it's based on identity, competence, things you mentioned. You know, I think we need to kind of understand that we are it anyway, whether we're aware of it or not. You know, and just be a little bit more gentler on our awareness. You know, like we don't have to decide. There's so much stuff we don't have to decide. It's so much more valuable to be open-minded to all of the possibilities than to know what is the truth.
Definitely. And yeah, 100% agree. And I think through these kind of discussions, we can get closer and closer by pickaxing our way through effort and getting to it. We won't know it for certain, but I think through this kind of conversation and discussion, we can all get a little bit closer to what is true. And that's going to evolve constantly. And we can change our minds if we hear new information, like we talked about before. So, Mihalis, I'm interested in language transfer. We've gone on for an hour
Oh
and a
wow!
half, and we haven't even talked about language transfer, my friend. How
All of this is language transfer.
all of this is language transfer, but let's make that amazing baby rise up from all this experience. What was the driver? Because you've had a lot of life experiences, you've had a lot of challenges, you've had a lot of interesting experience through relocating and living in a different language and discovering more about yourself. Was any of this related to the initial propulsion of creating language transfer after seeing the impact that language has made on your life?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was that, and also kind of, I don't know, the motivations were various. You know, I mean, I think I could list 10 principal motivations. You know.
What about two? Can you list two off the top of your head?
Well, yeah, like I said, you know, making people challenge their identity and their idea of what are cultures and languages and all of that, their perception of reality, their perception of their educational experience, you know, and the perception of their own intelligence and ability to learn. Making a project for free, saying, I don't want to compete with the world. I
Yeah.
want to collaborate. One, because that's what we should be doing. It makes sense. That's kind of like what we were built for. Two, I don't want to build something that its point is to make money move, because then that becomes an artificial decision-making mechanism, as I discussed, and that would shape the courses. So I don't ask for your email address. I don't have any publicity, not on the YouTube videos, not anywhere, you know,
Right.
not on the website, nothing. So it's like, no, the only point here is about making the best courses in the world. Now, that's what you automatically think that anyone is trying to do. But no, that's the point. Most people are just trying to make money.
Money.
And they sit around the table and they go, how do we make something that sells? And that's that. And that's so artificial and it's insane. It's really crazy. It's so normalized, but it's insane. Like that's the discussions that you have. Like that's what we went to study for. That's why we went through years of academia, sit around the table and think about that. Yeah. So there are I think I gave you 5 reasons there.
Yeah. That's incredible. And you're mentioning that individuals sometimes say that, oh, I'm trying to make the best course possible, but the money is the thing that's blocking their vision. And it's like that comes back to what we're talking about for the NGO and individuals who were kind of trapped in that paradigm where they knew they could have done more with the money or their time, but it's a powerful position. You're getting a decent compensation, you're feeling good, and you really took all your experiences in life and kind of just threw it into your course, which I just love. And it connects. Like I was listening to your Spanish course, and you really have a compassion to help, and you really want individuals to learn. And all these anecdotes that you relate from like the roots of certain words to Latin, and how all that relates to life. I mean, you really just connect people to themselves. Is that fair to say? Like you connect them to their true self without all that socialized pressure of what I should do in this society, and at least
Well,
one aspect of it.
I think it helps. It gives you a little window of reset because, I don't, you know, I've always fallen in the habit of not fantasizing. What is the word? Kind of putting on a pedestal and fantasizing about like the otherness as an escape, you know. And any culture is going to bring you the same ones that the one you're kind of leaving behind a bit. It just takes you through that process in a much more conscious way, during which you have some windows in which you reset and then get pulled back into kind of another indoctrination. Now, most people go through that process and talk about how crazy the Argentines are, or how crazy the Egyptians are, or how crazy the Germans are. They don't use that to realize how crazy their culture is, which I find absurd. Like, I don't know if I taught myself to think like that, or if I've always found it absurd. Like, in the same way that, you know, I grew up in like Ilford and the outskirts of London, and there were like 30 kids in my class, and I think 4 to 6 were English, and the rest were, you know, from all over the world and all different religions. And it's just like, well, how can any of us believe in our God? So, you know, like, it must all be bullshit, right? You know, and I didn't understand how that wasn't happening in other people's minds, and it was painful for me. Like, I had a crisis about it, because, you know,
Right.
God and chatting to God at night was a big deal for me. You know, like I used to pray when I was a kid, and felt an internal relationship, which I realized was probably with myself. You know, so I don't know. Maybe I've got a chip missing that makes this kind of destroying constructs irresistible, no matter how painful it is. But I definitely do recommend it all the same.
For sure. For sure. And I guess just cognizant on time, I think I'm going to go to the future motivations of where language transfer and you yourself are headed. And if there's any segue that you'd like to take there before closing remarks, feel free. But yeah, what's happening for the future of you, language transfer?
Well, I mean, it's so exciting. Lockdown has just been brilliant for language transfer. I'm almost sad to say. And I'm looking to hire people now. Like the Patreon campaign, you know, like in Argentina, as a starting wage, and then like if somebody is going to make a whole life out of language transfer, hopefully it can go up. $500 a month is a decent wage, especially for a young person like me 10 years ago, full of energy and running something that really wants their heart and soul. Then it's a perfect job. So I can hire 2 people at the moment. I'm just trying to find them. That's amazing. I mean, that's just the most exciting thing. So 1 person for like dissemination and admin and that kind of stuff. And a new teacher will be to finish the German course, to write Mandarin or Japanese, one of those 3 things. I'm giving the 3 options because I need to find the right person. So 3 options from the voting campaign. It makes it easier to find somebody. That's really exciting. So yeah, amazing. Like amazing. My idea is now to become like director of language transfer and be training new teachers that, you know, I co-write the courses with, and that I like very, like, you know, I direct them and give them some material and ideas and whatever. They use me and other people as test students, and we record courses like that. So that's the plan of where we go in. Also, I want people for visual material for the new languages and the existing languages, to continue creating visual material. And then there's this whole other arm that I'm working on, which is the thinking method generally. So the method applied to things that aren't language. So I'm working on introduction to music theory, which is mammoth, because explain music, like, go on. You know, it's really, really complicated and weaves together, like from the side of physics, how music works, to the theory side, which is scales and chords and all of that. It's the same. It's all interlinked in a way that gives me so many opportunities to write an amazing course, and so many opportunities to mess it up. But that's always the case. That's part of the process. Definitely. Yeah, it's all going brilliant.
That's fantastic.
The more I kind of let go and, you know, channel genuinely, which I always thought I was doing, and I guess that's part of the process of life, because the more layers you tear away, you realize, you know, the more you can do it. The more I do that, the better stuff goes.
That's huge. I'm really thrilled to hear this, Mihalis. I'm just so happy for you. You know, this is a project that you started pretty much not knowing the future. And to see your convictions about life come into your project and, you know, just the impact. Making a free course, it's amazing. I'm just really thrilled. And Mihalis, I guess we'll wrap it up to a close, my friend. So what I'll do is I'll ask you if you have where people can find you, any shout outs, and then after we'll go into your closing remarks. You can do it together or we can finish one at a time, whatever you'd like.
So yeah, languagetransfer.org is the website, and now we have an app that came out in May. It was done by volunteers, which is awesome, and it's got some problems for some devices, so I'm sorry if that happens, but you can just search in the App Store like Language Transfer or in Google Play. Facebook is where most stuff is shared. Instagram is very asleep. Twitter is a little asleep. I need someone to deal with that kind of stuff. At least you won't get overwhelmed by my posts. There's something I almost forgot. Patreon. I always forget that. So if you want to help this project, help me hire a team, help me branch it out into thinking method and other areas, music, physics, science, I've got all the energy for it. If you guys want to see that grow, you can donate with $1 a month. The monthly donations are what changed everything behind Language Transfer, because then you can project and do things like hire people, because it's more or less stable what's coming in. So that's Patreon, patreon.com/language transferred. If you'd like to support, or you can donate, make occasional donations on the website as well. And also, one of the most important things is sharing the experience you have with the courses, because until I hire this person, there's or some freelancers, which I'm supposed to be doing as well. The only way language transfer gets disseminated is through word of mouth, and people are obviously doing that. They tell me about it all the time, but they're obviously doing that because the usership is huge at the moment. So please keep doing that. That's everything, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. So definitely make sure, and we'll throw a link down for his Patreon page so you can support him with whatever you're able to. And yeah, definitely share it with your friends. I've shared it with a lot of my friends just because, I grew up in Canada. We learned French. I went through several years of French education, and honestly, you can't beat language transfer. The amount of when you do a math problem and then it's just you don't understand it, and then out of nowhere you just clicks. That's what you get with language transfer, except it happens every couple of minutes. It's you just get so much value from it. And I think with that, sir, what is your one message to the audience today? It can be regarding the topics we discussed, something that we didn't get to. Take it away in whatever direction you'd like.
I guess we were very serious, and one of the things I definitely should mention is that arguing with yourself will make you happier. It will resolve a lot, and it will just allow you furthermore to live with less shame and more acceptance and more peace, because it's a process of resolving internal conflicts, not creating them, because whether you recognize them or not, the internal conflict is there. The contradiction you have to ignore is requiring your brain to ignore it. So if you want to be happier, put the boxing gloves on.
Boom. Uppercut yourself. I love it, Mihalis, and I 100% agree. I've been on a similar journey with regards to fighting with myself, and I'm still on that, and I 100% agree. There's some tough calls you got to make on yourself, but you do become happier, and I think the world would be a better place with this message spread to many. So be sure to share it with your friends. And with that said, Mihalis, thank you very much for coming onto our show and sharing the amounts of knowledge, wisdom. And, I got a lot from it. I know for certain, and all the viewers and listeners will pick up lots of nuggets of gold for this. And I wish you the best with language transfer. And I hope to have you on once you spread through the educational system. And that's my hope. That's my hope for your journey, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for having me on and for doing this.
And to the viewers and listeners of this episode, thank you again for watching, listening, Be sure to share it with your friends, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey everyone, Param back after another amazing episode with another amazing guest. We hope we added value into your life so you could take the tips from this episode and fuel your process forward. If you enjoyed our episode today and think other friends or family members may also appreciate the lessons that our podcast brings, be sure to share us with them. Subscribe and rate our show so we know how we did. And always remember, trust the process. Awesome.
That was cool, right?